So this is a brand new video series where we're going to start from scratch and build a complete VR game on a computer that's never had Unity or anything. Install Unity, do all that work, build a VR game, publish it to Google Play so that people can download it, and we're going to record the whole entire process so that any part of the process that you want to go into and look at for more details, you'll be able to go into that video, take a look at it, and you'll be able to see a game also get built from scratch to getting released on Google Play. Now, I need you guys' help because I don't know exactly what type of game is going to be best for a tutorial series like this, whether it's a shooter or a maze game or a flying game. These are like the Unity VR samples I'm naming, but there's an adventure game, a roller coaster. What type of game is going to make for a good tutorial series? So put it in the comments below. Let me know what kind of game you think is going to be cool. And we're going to be jumping into this and installing Unity, JDK, the Android Sdk, the Google Vr Sdk, lots of SDKs. There's going to be lots of downloading and lots of installing. That's going to be really exciting. So stay tuned. Let's get right into this. Today we're installing Unity and Android Sdk. So we're going to go through absolutely everything it takes to begin the project, build it, and then publish it. It's going to be for mobile VR. Like I said, we're building for Google Cardboard or Gear VR or some other upcoming Android-based mobile VR headsets like the Ideal Lens K2 here. So let's get started. We're gonna assume that we have nothing. This computer has no Unity. It never has, and it has no Android SDK. So I thought this would be a good computer to get on and do this project. So the first thing is, let's look for the Unity download. And so we could go to choose your download. If I actually go back, there's the link right here, older versions of Unity. And so that's this link. I'm going to put this in the description. And that is, we could get Unity 5.5. 5.5 actually seems okay. It's worked for all of the testing I've done with it. I've seen a couple forum posts with problems, but I think that was mostly related to either to Daydream development. So this tutorial is not going to cover developing to Daydream, because as you can see, I don't have the Daydream headset or the Pixel phone, and so you have to have all that stuff. And then in order to publish to Daydream, you have to get approved by Google. And so far, Google's done some pretty interesting decisions about who they allow in their store, like denying lots of indies, like myself, okay, I'll admit it, and then approving content like this, where you got the complete project from the asset store. And
so the goal is
Daydream puts this on their store. So and it's not just me. There's a lot of other indies who have been totally ignored by Daydream, but they're putting these complete projects on the asset store. So if you're developing for Daydream, beware that you may or may not get approved for the store. And so that's one reason where the Google Play, Google Cardboard, it's just open, and people with the Gear VR headset can easily use the Google Cardboard apps. So we're developing for Google Cardboard, and we're going to publish this project to the Google Play Store. And so that comes down to deciding what version of Unity you want to install. So Unity 5.6 beta, which is not shown here, is out, and that has the native support for the Daydream and Cardboard. but it's buggy. There's forum posts about that. I'm not going to pull it up right now, but 5.6 beta is buggy for cardboard development, so I would advise not to use that. And the stable versions that I've found are 5.5 and 5.4.2. And 5.4.2 is really good, except the only thing that didn't work in 5.4.2 was baking multiple scenes, lighting at the same time with the bake asynchronous function. So because I needed to use that for one of my projects, I've switched to Unity 5.5.0, and this seems to work fine for cardboard or Gear VR, or basically any mobile VR development. So for this tutorial series, we're going to be using Unity 5.5.0, and I think it's important that select the Unity installer here. And the reason why is because it gives you a couple of options that help out over just getting the straight out 64-bit version. So here we need to select Android build support. And if you're building for iOS, you would need to select that. And then you can look at the other targets here. It's handy for me. I like to install WebGL because sometimes I do game jams, or I'm just want to build a game or a project for a website. So usually I select Android and WebGL. Natively, it's going to have support for standalone, which is building to the PC, Mac, or Linux to make an exe, for example. Here it's asking where to install Unity at. Now, you're going to end up installing multiple versions of Unity, so it's a good idea to install those different versions of Unity into different program files folders. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say Unity 5.5.0, so I know that this is the Unity 5.5.0. That way when I install Unity 5.6, for example, I can put that into a different folder, and the Unity versions can run alongside of each other. Now, I like to develop with Visual Studio, so I'm going to accept those agreements and install Visual Studio. So while Unity is installing, I was going to get the Android SDK because the Android SDK is required, and I can't find it anywhere. All I find is, the Android Studio that has the Freemason icon on it, and the SDK is gone. And so there's even got the Stack Overflow, Stack Exchange here. They say, how do I download the Android SDK without downloading the Android Studio? And it says, go down here where you can get just the Android SDK. Okay, so I was looking for that. And if we go to download options, select a different platform. Here's Android Studio. And then get just the command line tools. And so, but the actual Android SDK is gone. You can get these tools. So I downloaded the tools. Okay, so I've searched the whole tools folder and there's no ADB. So unless I'm missing something, the only way to get Android SDK is to download Android Studio. Here it is, includes the Android SDK. So the only way to get it is to get the exe here and agree to the terms and conditions. And so that's a 1.6 gigabyte download, but unfortunately that looks like the only way to get the Android SDK. So we're gonna do it. Meanwhile, Unity's installing. Let's see how long this takes. Okay, so Unity has finished downloading. I'm going to go ahead and launch Unity and try to build without Android SDK and see what happens. And I'm just going to use Unity Personal. And my company earns less than 100,000. But that's going to change soon. Let's make a new project. So I'm going to call this VR Test 01. And I'm going to turn off Unity Analytics. This is good, but for that's going to be a little bit more advanced, and we're not going to get into that into this project, that's for sure. All right, so we got Unity up and running, and let's try to build a VR project. Now, the quickest way to build a VR project is going to be to download the Google Vr Sdk for Unity. So if I search for Google VR, the easiest way actually to get here is going to say Google Vr GitHub. And so this is the Google Vr Sdk for Android. I want the Google Vr Sdk for Unity. That takes us here to the GitHub's homepage. Now, currently, as of this date and a month ago, they released version 1.10, which has a number of issues with it. So I really advise to click on this commits button. That's going to take you to the commits, which is the versions of Google Vr Sdk. So we could go way back to, and get a really old version from 2014. But the one that works great at the moment is the Google Vr Sdk version 1.03. So I'm going to click on this. And actually, I think an easier way is to go back and to click onto this button that says browse the repository at this point in history. And so we can see Google Vr Sdk version 1.03. And so I want to download this, and I'm going to download the zip. Now, the zip file contains a lot of useful stuff. There's an example project with the tower defense game. There's some example projects for the spatial audio. And what we're actually going to just use, though, is the Unity package that's inside of this zip file. So as soon as this is done downloading, okay, so that download has finished. I'm going to open up the zip file. And generally what I like to do is just, once I have that folder, extract it out, and then I'm going to rename it to Google Vr Sdk for Unity 1.03. So I have a copy on my computer for each version, then I don't have to download them all the time. Okay, so we got the Google Vr Sdk 1.03, and there is the Google Vr Sdk for Unity. You can double-click the Unity pack file to open it up into your current project, or you could do assets, import package, custom package, and you could select it this way. So just to make things easy, let's double-click it and bring it into our project. Now, okay, that's opening up Unity actually, so we'll go back and do assets, import package, custom package, and there's the Unity package. Now this gives you the opportunity to deselect things that you don't want to use. So I'm going to want the demo scenes. I'm going to use those today to try to make a build. So I'm going to want the whole entire Google Vr Sdk, but here's the plugins folder, and there's Android, iOS. iOS has a lot of files that I actually don't need because I'm not building for iOS, and then this is for 32-bit. I don't need that. I'm going to use the 64-bit because I'm on a 64-bit machine, and I want the scripts and the spatial audio DLLs to work, of course, with my 64-bit machine while I'm developing. So bring in the 64-bit plugins. Now here it's going to say there's obsolete Just say I made a backup. Go ahead. That should fix the errors. And so down here I'm watching, it said finished. Now we're going to get a pop-up here that says additional libraries must be imported for Google VR to be working with this version of Unity. So I'm going to say import package, and it actually is, the screen's here, it just, we can't see it. We need to click into Unity, and there it is. And we just need to import these plugin files that go into the Android folder so that it works, because we don't have one of the native versions of Daydream / Cardboard that's built into Unity. And what I mean by that is when you go into the build settings and you look at the player settings, if you go to other settings and virtual reality supported, there's no SDK here for Google VR or Cardboard. And so that's what that pop-up was talking about. And it needed to bring in an additional, some additional plugin files into this Android folder, because this option is not going to be set. We're going to have that deselected when we build for Cardboard or Google Play. Now, we'll turn it on when we build for Gear VR, because that's what the Oculus setting is for on Android. When your build target is Android, is for Gear VR. Now, speaking of that, we need to switch this project over to Android right here. And I'm going to say switch platform. Now, that was from going to File, Build Settings. And so because we're set to Android and the virtual reality supported is ticked, and the SDK is Oculus, that's going to build for Gear VR. And then when we build for Google VR, we're going to uncheck this, and it's going to build for Cardboard. Now, I want to build a scene to my phone. I've already enabled USB debugging. Now, USB debugging is enabled by going into your phone settings and selecting the About Phone, and then clicking on build number 7 times. If you do that, you'll get a new button in settings, which is called developer options. You can click developer options, then you can turn on USB debugging. So because USB debugging is turned on my phone, I'm going to go ahead and plug it in. Now, normally I should be able to go to the command prompt and say ADB devices and get a list of all of the devices that are connected that have USB debugging enabled. And because I don't have Android SDK, I obviously can't use ADB. So we're going to try to make a build and see what happens. We're not going to start building the game on day one. We're just going to get everything installed. And so I'm going to use a demo scene. Now, if I go into the demo scene, there's controller demo and headset demo. Controller demo is for Daydream because it has the little controller with it, and this is for that little Daydream controller. So we want to use headset demo and open up demo scene, because that's for Google Cardboard or Google VR and Google Play. That's what we're building for. So in here there's a little VR scene, and if I hit play and I hold down Alt on the keyboard, I can rotate my head. There's a dot in the middle of the screen that reacts to this cube, and if I click on it, which is clicking this button, then it just teleports to a different random location. And Control tilts the head. So if I hold down Control, I can tilt the head, and Alt to rotate. So I just want to build this project to the phone. So what I'm going to do is go into the build settings, and we're going to go to add open scenes. That's just going to add the demo scene from the headset demo. And then I'm going to go to player settings. We're going to set this orientation to landscape left and turn off 32-bit display buffer. We're going to go into the detailed build settings in a future video, because there's a lot to go through here. But for today, we're just going to make things real simple by selecting, making sure virtual reality supported is not turned on. We have to give it a custom bundle identifier. So I'm just going to say my company, and we'll say test VR01 is the bundle identifier. And here we're set to API level 9. That's too low. We'll go up to at least API level 16 for Google Cardboard. And if you have a phone that's older than that, then you aren't going to be playing it, and that's fine because the GPU isn't good enough to play anyways. So if you type in Android dashboards, you'll get the dashboards here for Android developers. And this shows us some of the data about what devices out there are running. And we could see that the majority of the world is on 4.4 or higher. And this is just not very many devices are below 4.4. And so, you know, I selected 4.1. It's realistic to go all the way up to AP level 19. Because if you have an older phone than that, it's not good enough for mobile VR anyways. So we'll select that, and we are ready to try to build this thing. We'll say build and run. And I'm going to give the APK a name. And what I'm going to do is make a new folder here, and I'm going to call it builds. So it's next to the assets, which is this folder right here. So in here, you'll see all the same stuff. But one level up from that, I have the builds. I don't want to see the builds in my project at all, but we are in the VR test project. So we'll put the builds in here, and I'm going to make a folder called Android, and we'll just put the APK there. And it's saying select the Android SDK root folder. So right off, I'm going to hit cancel because we don't have it. And I hope somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. But as we discussed, downloading this huge Android Studio EXE is the only way to get Android SDK. So unfortunately, I can't deselect Android Studio, and the Android virtual device is an Android emulator. I don't know if that would be any good for mobile VR, so I'm going to deselect that. And I want to deselect Android Studio, but I can't. So we'll put it at Program Files, and then the Android SDK install location. App data would be, in my opinion, a really bad place for that. I want it in a place where I can get to it. I'm going to go to my C drive and make a new folder, and I'm going to call it Android. Now pick a spot that you think is best, but I generally like to have a folder for Android development called Android that's at the root of my C drive, and I have my Android SDK and my IDE in here like Eclipse. But so for today, we're just going to put C drive / Android, and then we're going to make a new folder in here called SDK, and I want the Android SDK to go into this folder. So this is the Android SDK install location. I'm going to change that definitely to change it out of my app data, because you'll need to get in there pretty frequently. I don't want anything in my start menu. I don't even want Android Studio. I have seen, however, that Unity is able to export to an Android Studio project. So there could come a time where you actually would want Android Studio for something, because you can build your Unity project, export it to Android Studio, and then maybe add, layers like native Android layers on top of that. But for mobile VR, we're not going to get into any of that. So this is the Android SDK. Here we go. This is what I wanted. And if I search for ADB, I should actually have a program in here called ADB. There it is. I wish this came with the download from the tools. But it doesn't, unfortunately. It should come with this. But anyways, now I got the tools, the ADB. So here we're going to see the ADB is located in the Platform Tools folder. So here we are, Android SDK, and then there's Platform Tools, there's ADB, and then there's also Tools. So there's more tools in here that we can use. I for sure want to get the ADB as an environment variable so I can use it in my command line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to right click on computer and go to properties, and we'll go to advanced system settings, and here we get access to environment variables. And if we look for the environment variable called path and edit this, we can add on a semicolon and paste in our path to our platform tools folder and hit OK. And you might even want to get the environment variable set to the tools folder too if you want to use any of these exes from command line. So right now if I type ADB, it's not going to work because I need to restart the command prompt. There we go. So now ADB is working, and if I say ADB devices like I tried before, here's a list of attached devices, and it doesn't find anything because my phone is set on USB charging mode. I'm going to switch it to... This should still work in charging mode. Okay, so if you still can't get ADB devices, you're going to need to get the driver for your phone. SMG930V. I found it. Okay, let's say get downloads. I think I found it. The USB. Download. Continue. So for each phone, you're going to have to, find the USB driver. And so some of the good search terms are ADB driver, Android driver, USB driver, and then add your phone model number into that. And it's not working. I have in my device manager ADB interface and CDC serial as devices with issues. Okay, the computer's rebooted, and if I go to the command prompt into a ADB devices, I'm not going to get anything, and I think I know why. I have my phone plugged into a USB 3 port on the front of my computer case. I believe if you're having problems like this, get it into a USB 2 port and make sure... or try to get one on the back of your computer that's directly into the motherboard, not one that's on the front of the case. So now reinstalling the new drivers, version 1.5. I'm hoping because the phone is plugged into the USB port on the back of the computer that this is not going to fail. And it looks like it's working. So... remember, it is important, I believe, what cables you're using. It's best to use the cables that come with the phone, and then make sure you're plugged into hopefully a USB 2 port that's on the back of your computer. And maybe you just won't experience these problems, but today I definitely had a lot of issues getting the USB drive, the ADB driver working. Now if I run ADB devices, I could see that it's listing my device ID number. So and it says unauthorized, which means that I should get a pop-up on my phone to authorize it. However, the driver is successful, so it wants to restart. Okay, so the computer's rebooted, and if I open up a command prompt and do ADB devices, what do we have? What do we have? It's starting the daemon, and we have my unauthorized device attached. So that means that the Android ADB.driver is installed correctly. And if I were to manage my computer and go to Device Manager, those errors are gone now. And I can see the Android phone with the ADB device, which means I'm ready for Android development. And it's ADB has a lot of handy tools. So if you're not familiar with ADB, get familiar with it for sure, because it could do a lot of handy stuff, even for Unity game development or VR development. So now that that's done, I'm ready to restart Unity, and let's go into the C drive. I'm getting ahead of myself with Unity because we need to go to the Android SDK and open up the Sdk Manager. So the Sdk Manager is where we could download all of the Android SDK and tools that we need. So it already has selected some of the Android SDK tools and platform tools, and it's got Android version 7, API 25. And remember, this is linked up to our project. You could see the different APIs that are installed versus what build target you're targeting. So if I go to my player settings, remember we set to API level 19, and so what these numbers are is the API level. If we go back to 19, that is Android 442, but with Android API 25 installed, it doesn't have the check here because this is missing, and that's fine. We are going to go ahead and install that. We can it'll let us, it's backwards compatible to let us publish for Android API level 19. So this is fine. And we got the tools, it looks like, that we need. There are sometimes some tools that you need, or some additional packages that you might need to come in here into the extras and install, like Google Play services, depending on what you end up doing with your project. So Android Sdk Manager is important. For now, I'm going to install the 11 packages that it had came with by default. And in order to do that, I'm going to have to accept the license and then click install. And this is, without a doubt, one of the slowest downloads you will ever have. And this thing is going to take quite a while to download. So I probably have to download these before I can build actual APK. But I'm going to try it real quick because we're set up here with the demo scene and it's in the build, and we've already set up these build settings. We're ready to go because we tried to build and run earlier. Now build is just going to make the APK. Build and run is going to make the APK and then copy it to your device, which is attached via USB cable. It's going to copy it to this device. So in my test VR builds Android folder, I'm going to go ahead and try to make this SDK, and it says select the Android SDK root folder. And again, this is why it's a good idea not to have it lost somewhere in the app data, because it wants the root folder, which is this SDK folder. And then select the Java Development Kit folder, the JDK folder. And so if I go to my program files, Java, I only have JRE, not JDK. So I'm going to hit cancel again. And we're still not ready to build. So it says the Android SDK Manager has been updated. It's recommended that you close it and you open it again. So even though it has 5 more packages for me, I'm going to close it like it said and open up the SDK Manager again. And now it's going to search. Okay, it has 5 more packages for me. I accept the license, install that. And while it's doing that, let's go ahead and get the Java Developers Kit. So that's the JDK. We are going to go to the downloads here of Java. And they got Java SE downloads. We should see the JDK right here. And so I want to download that. There is version 8.111 and 8.112. And then this is just the demo and sample. So I guess I'll get the newer version. I'm going to accept the license agreement. And I'm going to download for Windows 64-bit. So JDK version 1.1.2 for Windows 64. All right, we got the JDK to install. I'm going to just hit next. That stuff looks fine. Okay, so now if I go back to my C drive, program files, Java, that looks better. I got the JDK folder now. And Unity wanted to know where that was at. So if I say build and run, it's going to ask me for where the JDK is at. And actually, it looks like it already found it. And it's looking for the device. So what we need to do here is make sure the device is active, screen's turned on, and then it's going to allow USB debugging. And I'm going to say always allow from this computer. There we go. So now that I'm allowed to, there it is. It's going to go ahead and build the APK. I didn't have to tell it where the JDK was at. I guess it found it automatically. And now it's building the APK. And as soon as it's done with that, it's going to copy the APK to the phone. Now we still need to... it looks like the Android SDK is done. So that may or may not have to finish before you can successfully build an APK. Nevertheless, it's a good idea to get all these packages downloaded and updated, because sometimes you'll have errors, and especially if you're dealing with different libraries or packages, but sometimes you'll have errors where the reason why you're getting errors is because your Android SDK needs to get updated. So that means you need to go back to your C drive Android SDK folder and open up the Sdk Manager and let it check like this and make sure that it doesn't have any updates for you. So this looks good. I've clicked build to the phone, and here we go. It's up and running. And so this is the demo scene that we had. And so I could put this into my viewer and make sure it works, because you never know. This split screen. Yep, it's VR. It's showing a VR picture. Okay, cool. So today is day 1 of the project, and the goal today was just to get all of the tools, programs, SDKs downloaded that we need to start developing for mobile VR. And so that is accomplished. We have built the demo scene here to the phone, and we're going to come back tomorrow and start building a VR game, go through all the different parts of development, such as lighting and the build settings, and how to make some levels, how to move the player, all this type of stuff. We're going to build a complete game, publish it to Google Play, and that way you could just see the whole process of how to get a game and get it published, get it out there so people can download it. All right, you guys, thank you for watching, and stay tuned for part 2.